So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Brexit causing a collapse in European research funding for Oxbridge. So just in case anyone doesn't know, Oxbridge is Oxford and Cambridge. And this story is sad in a lot of ways, I'll be honest. So one of the UK's most prestigious universities has seen its funding from a large European research programme plummet from £62 million a year to nothing since Brexit, new figures show. So that's not a surprise given we're out the Horizon programme, that's where the money comes from. The UK did well out of the Horizon programme. UK-based scientists won a lot of funding for their projects. Now they get nothing, but more importantly, this isn't just about money. There is tremendous prestige attached to these research grants, something money can't replace. The latest statistics from the European Commission reveal that Cambridge University, which netted €483 million or £433, depending on exchange rates, over the last 7 years of the last European research funding programme, because they're typically done in 7-year spans, Horizon 2020, they have not received any funding in the first 2 years of the new Horizon Europe programme. Meanwhile, Oxford, which had won £523 million from the earlier programme, has only been awarded euros. €523 million has only been awarded €2 million to date from Horizon Europe, and it shows you how well these two universities are at getting funding, near a £500 million mark each. Some of the money would go back into the UK economy, small scale stuff like staffing costs, and just living here helps the economy a bit. Amongst other things, but it's good for the prestige of the university and getting more kind of students into the universities as well. It also adds prestige in bringing more students to the university, but Brexit has taken all that away. Britain's associate membership of the €95.5 billion Horizon programme was agreed upon in principle as part of the Brexit trade deal negotiations in 2020, but ratification was disrupted after the UK failed to implement the Northern Ireland Protocol. Such funding is vital to UK universities because it enables research collaborations with institutions across Europe and carries considerable international prestige. And the Horizon programme is massive. So much money and opportunity for the researchers to bid to have their projects funded. Some of these projects are global things. There was one example where a researcher in the UK wanted to study aspects of ancient China. He had an agreement with the museum that held the exhibits. I can't find the specific example of it, but I have mentioned it before in the context of Horizon, and it's just a shame these sorts of programs won't happen because there's so much we can learn from these kind of historians and other kinds of researchers that we're just not going to learn because of Brexit. Basically, this was such a diverse range of projects, and that's all been lost. Quote, for higher education and research, there are no new opportunities and no actual upsides from Brexit, end quote. And that's from Simon, Professor of Higher Education at Oxford. And I wish these scientists were spoken to more, but despite Brexit, we would have been in the Horizon programme, but we played games over the protocol, and that led us to not getting ascension, and I don't blame the EU for that. I blame the Tories, because it was just an agreement in principle. But now we're going to lose some very talented scientists, very talented researchers. Being in the Horizon programme allowed us to compete with other EU member states, but more importantly with the USA, which, despite the jokes I make about them, they are very strong in the research department, incredibly strong. China are on the come up as well, but I think geography and the CCP will be largely prohibitive for China to directly grow its domestic universities. That's why you see a lot of kind of Chinese students and I think professors that will study and teach in the West, for now anyways. The government has guaranteed it will cover all successful Horizon Europe grants applied for by the end of March. But after watching the political wranglings for more than 2 years, many academics are now leaving the UK, saying they no longer believe their vital European research partnership will be protected, or partnerships will be protected. And from what I have seen, the money has not been replaced yet. You can't replace the prestige, so the UK hasn't even replaced the funding yet for some of these projects, because a lot of these lecturers complain, or these professors complain, that the money was not guaranteed, and that should have been guaranteed by the UK. We also cut ourselves off from some of the top researchers in the EU who may have seen the UK as a good option to set up shop. We wrap them up in red tape, and clearly they don't like that. In August of last year, Professor Augusta McMahon, an archaeologist specialising in the Middle East, left Cambridge University, where she had worked for 26 years, to return to Chicago University, although she was wooed by the US by what she calls, quote, the best job in my field, end quote. She says Brexit uncertainty was a factor. Quote, I no longer thought the government would either associate with Horizon Europe or provide replacement funding, end quote, she said. And that's terrifying because the government had promised they would replace the funding, but clearly the professors didn't think that was the case, and I would take their word over it than anything this Tory government have said. This is a person who most likely would have been courted back to the US for some time over those 26 years, but, she didn't go. Brexit was the game changer for her. The government kept saying they would replace the Horizon funding, but in these cases they didn't seem to. And without the funding, they cannot do anything. They cannot continue to do research. They cannot hire researchers to help them or get anything done. Professor Paul Farrow, who researches the genetic epidemiology of ovarian and breast cancer, left Cambridge University after 26 years at the end of last year and now works at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, LA. Farrow, who was involved in 2 larger EU-funded research projects in the past 15 years, said it was becoming much harder to find funding for his field in the UK, saying, quote, and the lack of opportunities to apply for EU funding made the outlook even more bleak, end quote. And this is research that could have helped people in the UK who suffer from these types of cancers. I do wonder if the UK is aiming at funding scientific projects that they can make money from for the UK or boost the UK's military, R&D essentially for the military. They made a league table for schools that focus more on academic studies and push down the more artistic studies. I wonder if that's what the UK Horizon rival will look like, because clearly the funding available for this kind of research in the UK is not available, and that's tragic. Gaspar Jekeli, a German professor of neuroscience who was based at Exeter University, started at Heidelberg University last week, has taken his high Catch-It European Research Council ERC grant, advanced grant with him. He said, quote, a lack of security around European collaborations and funding was one of my reasons of going. He said, quote, recruiting researchers and postdocs from Europe was becoming increasingly hard. A colleague of mine at Exeter had won a prestigious ERC grant, but we don't know what will happen with it. No one wants to lose a €3 million award, end quote. And it's not easy to win these bids, I imagine, and to potentially have that taken away from you is heartbreaking. You've got to compete with other scientists doing a range of different projects to get funding for it. Having to uproot your entire life and move because of the clowns in charge is painful. Leaving your current job and everything else, having to find a new job at another university is difficult. Job hunting sucks. I can imagine trying to recruit a team for a project and then having to look at visas and other costs. It just makes the entire process look dumb. And the UK can try and streamline the process, but would you prefer some red tape or no red tape? And that's the options these scientists have. And they are very sought after. Last April, the ERC gave 150 grant winners to the UK 2 months to decide whether to move with their grant to a European institution or lose their funding. In the end, UK Research and Innovation, the government research funding organisation, matched the funding of those who stayed, but 1 in 8 left the UK. And I don't know if that replacement funding really came in for everyone. Vasilki Papasiba, sorry about pronunciations, an education expert at Cardiff University, has researched the impacts of Brexit on universities, said the UK might continue to lose talented researchers this way, saying, quote, nearly 50% of ERC UK-based grant winners are nationals of a different country, so that would predispose them to outward mobility, she said. And that phrase, outward mobility, is interesting. From the examples we have seen, some of these scientists went to EU member states, that's where they might be from originally. Some of them went to the US, and I'm assuming they are US nationals. I do wonder if the British researchers had the same opportunities, or if they had those opportunities, would they also go? Because if the EU or the US wanted to poach our top talent, it sounds like it wouldn't be too hard if visas were, extremely streamlined, because they would have the potential promises of funding, but also by moving to the EU, they would have more ability to build the research teams they want to build, more access to PhD students and things like that, and it would be the same for the US as well, because there's no movement issues in the US, just living costs. If you want to move from, say, New York to Kentucky, you don't need a visa for that. But if you want to move from Germany to the UK, you do need a visa for that. So yeah, they have options. Some of the American professors would have options to go back to the States or potentially to an EU member state, depending on what the visa situation is like. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And this is just tragic, absolutely tragic. But hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.